Today on Super Soul Sunday, he's been named one of the 100 most influential people by Time magazine.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Journalist, podcaster, and author of 5 New York Times bestselling books, Malcolm Gladwell.
What does it mean to change someone's mind?
As a columnist for The New Yorker and host of the popular podcast Revisionist History, Malcolm challenges us to look at life from a different perspective.
And I think, you know what, if it happens as often as it happens, maybe there's something deeper going on here.
So proud of you, really.
We first met on The Oprah Show to discuss his book, Blink, which became a global phenomenon, selling nearly 6 million copies. It's been translated into more than 25 languages.
What's showing up are these unconscious things that we're not really very good at being aware of, we're not really in control of, that are a function of the kind of world we live in.
In a time when division, tension, and anger seem to pervade our daily lives, Malcolm Gladwell once again invites us to turn the world onto its side and take a closer look at what's really going on. In his gripping new book, Talking to Strangers, What We Should Know About the People We Don't Know, Malcolm puts forth the theory that too often we make dramatic, often dangerous assumptions about people we don't know.
Is there something fundamentally wrong with the way we are making sense of people who are different from ourselves? Are we bringing the wrong strategies to that problem?
Through well-known cases like the Bernie Madoff scandal and the Amanda Knox trial, the Jerry Sandusky abuse trial, and the racially charged arrest and death of Sandra Bland, Malcolm Gladwell examines his belief that many of us unconsciously invite conflict and misunderstanding into our own lives.
It will change the way you look at the news. It will change the way you experience all encounters with other people. I have to tell you, I love this book. This is my favorite of all the books, except Tipping Point, Blink, David and Goliath. But this is, I think, some of your most profound work.
Oh, thank you.
And particularly for a time such as this that we're living in. And everybody thinks the world is topsy-turvy. And you have a way of throwing over the rocks and letting us see underneath and allowing us to actually see that things are not always as they seem. Mm-hmm. And now you have so many imitators that they're called the Gladwellian imitators. How does that feel?
You might have a few yourself. I don't think of them as imitators.
You don't?
I think there's a kind of, I always thought...
By that I mean you've created an entirely new genre of books.
I always thought I was joining a movement as opposed to leading a movement. I sort of felt like I was doing what journalists and academics have always tried to do, which is to give us the means to look at familiar problems in a new way. But maybe, so I don't know. It's always odd. It's always odd to think of yourself as being someone who started something. I think that's a little. I'll let others say that.
Okay, I'm saying you started something.
All right, I'll accept it.
Yes, this Gladwellian era that we're in now of genre of books. But this is particularly interesting, Talking to Strangers. How did you come to decide that this was going to be the next book? You know, we literally are waiting for when the next book is coming out. It's been now almost 6 years. Mm-hmm. How did you decide that this would be it? And Talking to Strangers was the rock you wanted to uncover?
Yeah. We had that wave of police shooting cases, brutality cases, beginning with Michael Brown in 2014. Mm-hmm. And I was really shaken up by them. And then I sort of began to read about that problem and realized that it had been going on forever, which I suppose is very naive of me not to have realized that, that it was on a scale I had never imagined. 1,000 civilians are killed every year by police in this country.
It's particularly been going on forever with African Americans. I was saying this to my white friends, and they were saying, oh, no. I go, it's been going on forever. Now we just have the cameras to show you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just thought there was something broader there, that the kind of ways in which we were trying to make sense of these events seemed to me to be inadequate. And I also, what I really dislike about those kinds of cases is where we have a big fuss and there's all kinds of people jumping up and down, and we end up pointing at someone and saying,
Yeah, because we're always looking to blame someone.
yeah, it's him.
Yeah.
He just didn't know he's racist, he didn't know what he was doing, he's a bad cop, he's an evil person. And I think, you know what, if it happens as often as it happens, maybe there's something deeper going on here. And I'm
Deeper
also,
than racism?
well, in addition to, you can't separate race from these police shooting cases. It is inextricably part of the reason why they happen. But you also can't say that this is just about a racist cop, because it's more than that. There's something deeper going on with the way in which we have structured relationships between, not just between police officers and civilians, but also between strangers of all kinds. And that's really where I got to with my book. I was like, can we take a step back and say, wait a minute, is there something fundamentally wrong with the way we are making sense of people who are different from ourselves? Are we bringing the wrong strategies to that problem? And is there a way for me to kind of shed a light on those kinds of strategies in a way that helps us not just make sense of things like Sandra Bland or Michael Brown or,
Jerry
Laquan
Sandusky,
McDonald,
Amanda Knox.
Jerry Sandusky,
Yeah, the Stanford rape case, Bernie Madoff. Yes.
I mean, all of these cases struck me as being versions of the same problem, which is there are two people who are trying to have a conversation and they can't figure each other out. And they can't figure each other out because they're making errors. So the question is, what are those errors?
You write on page 14, if we were more thoughtful as a society, if we were willing to engage in some soul searching about how we approach and make sense of strangers, Sandra Bland would not have ended up dead in a Texas jail cell. So she's a central figure in this book. Tell me why.
So she's the beginning and the end of the
Yes.
book. She's the frame for the whole book. Obviously, I have thousands of cases I could have picked to be the frame for it. But there was something about just how stupid and senseless and heartbreaking her case was. Here's a woman who is 28 years old, who has come to get us to start her life anew in
Prairie View, Texas.
Yeah, in a lovely little college town in the middle of rural Texas.
And we must say this happened, as you just mentioned, after Michael Brown, after Freddie Gray, after Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Walter Scott.
Yeah.
And now Sandra Bland.
Now Sandra Bland. And she's a very politically aware person. But she had some difficulties in Chicago. She's moving, she's starting her life over. She gets a job she literally arrived in Prairie View, Texas that day. She has a job interview, she gets this job. She's leaving the campus to buy groceries. And a police officer looks at her and makes a judgment. And his judgment is, I think there's something funny about her. And he trumps up an excuse to pull her over. And what is so heartbreaking about that case, as you remember, is we have the dash cam records the conversation that ensues between...
We all hear the entire conversation.
The whole conversation. And it goes on for pages.
Well, it starts out, he's friendly. He comes up and asks her, is she okay? And why are you here? And we think it's fine until he asks her to put out the cigarette. Yes.
And she says, correctly, why do I have to put out my cigarette? And by the way, she hasn't done anything.
Right.
He pulls up behind her. This is a kind of weird but important detail. He pulls in behind her. She turns right out of the campus, and she's going along the ring road of the campus. And he thinks there's something funny about her. So he pulls out and he drives up really fast behind her. So what does she do? She moves over to get out of the way, of course, which is what you do when a cop is driving really fast.
That's right.
You
do the thing that we're told we're supposed to do, pull over to the side.
But she doesn't use her turning signal. Because she's getting out of the way, right?
Yes.
So what does he do? He pulls her over and he says, ma'am, you didn't use your turning signal. It's a completely, and she's like, wait, what did I do? I mean,
I didn't use my turning signal because I was getting out of your way.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so she's irritated, as she should be on this Trump. And so he says, he is about to tell her, ma'am, you should have used your your turning signal. She lights a cigarette. He says, could you put that out? And she says correctly, no, why do I have to put out a cigarette? And then everything goes sideways.
Get out of the car now, or I'm going to remove you.
And I'm calling my
I'm going to yank you out of here.
Okay, you going to yank me out of my car?
And they have this argument that escalates, and he ends up hitting her, dragging her out of the car, handcuffing her, and putting her in jail.
Yeah, yes.
Where she commits suicide 2 days later.
Yes.
It's just, I must have read and listened to that transcript. I can't even tell you how many times. It upsets me more each time I hear it. And the question is, how is it something that trivial can go so badly awry in broad daylight in one of the most civilized countries in the world?
Yes, and you say so correctly. We see that story, we see Philando Castile, we see Michael Brown, we see all those stories, and people just move on.
Yeah.
And you wrote Talking to Strangers because you wanted us to stop and not move on.
I don't want people to ever forget who Sandra Bland is.
Yeah.
But we can't keep filing these things away and forgetting about them without drawing some kind of conclusions about why they happen.
Coming up,
So how do we begin to actually shift from the judgment of others and then start looking at ourselves and asking the question, what role do I play in this? Is that your attempt to try to get us to do that?
So what I wanted to do with the book is to systematically break down the faulty assumptions that lead encounters between strangers to go awry. So I meet you for the first time. All we know about each other is what we can see about each other. We start to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes that goes well. Sometimes it goes horribly wrong.
But we're making judgments all the
whole
time
time.
based on our own unconscious biases and conscious.
Exactly.
Correct?
I'll give you one of the ones that I spend a lot of time on was what I call the assumption of transparency, which is when I see you, I observe your demeanor, your face, your expressions, your emotions, your body language, and I draw conclusions about that. And my assumption is that the way you represent your emotions on your face and with your body language is reflective, is consistent with the way you feel in your heart. If you smile at me, it means you're happy. If you frown at me, it means you're not happy, right? That is true with some people some of the time, but it is not true of many people a lot of the time.
Now, I think it's so interesting because you use in the book, you call it, I think, the friend's fallacy.
Yeah.
Because we've all grown up watching these sitcoms and we see in the characters the match between whatever's going on looks like whatever their face is also representing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I took an episode of Friends. And by the way, when you watch Friends, you're reminded about how insanely complex those shows were. Like, so much happens. So my first thing was, if you turn off the sound on an episode of Friends, can you follow what's going on? And the answer is absolutely.
Absolutely.
And why can you follow? Because they're insanely complicated. Because everything that happens is on everyone's face. When Monica is angry, she looks angry. When Ross is perplexed, he looks perplexed, and all the way down the line. And that's our assumption of the way the world works. We assume that our emotions are reliably being broadcast to the world. Turns out that's not true at all. So I had a psychologist who studies facial expressions analyze a segment of that Friends episode for me and break it down. And it is absolutely the case. There's a kind of way in which emotions of the face can be registered and kind of
I thought this was so fascinating. Yes.
Recorded.
Yeah.
And what she did was she said, okay, in a specific subset of a scene where Ross is really angry, what's on his face? And the answer is the perfect illustration of anger. And in a specific scene where Monica has mixed emotions, she is both, upset at her brother, but
finding
also,
them, but also
like wants to express her love for her brother. Does her face show that mix of emotions? The answer is totally does. Why? Because they're actors. in the real world,
When I was reading this, I must say, Malcolm, I was thinking the Friends actors are going to be so happy to read this because you were saying perfect execution of the emotion, right?
yes, but in the real world, it doesn't work that way.
May I say that so many times I was reading this book and I'd get to the end of an analysis and I go, gosh, that is so true. So true, because in the real world, it doesn't.
Doesn't match. I have a chapter on the Amanda Knox case.
Yes.
That's the whole Amanda Knox case in a nutshell. Her inner emotions don't match the way she behaves. She behaved like someone who didn't care what happened to her dead roommate. Inside, she cared, but she just is someone who her inner feelings and her outward expression of emotion don't match.
And it started the moment she was with other friends of the roommate who was murdered, and she didn't have the same reaction they did. So they then become suspicious of why isn't she behaving like us?
Why isn't she grieving?
Yeah. Why was her hug so stiff?
The technical word for what she is mismatched. Her inner feelings don't match her outward emotions. When we deal with someone who is mismatched, there's a very real risk we will get them very badly wrong. So Bernie Madoff is mismatched. He's in the opposite way. I don't know if did you ever meet him?
No, I never had.
I never met him either.
Thank God I was not
Yeah, I know,
invested
exactly.
with him.
I know,
Yes.
exactly.
Thank goodness I didn't meet him, because I would have been seduced too. You know why? Because I would have thought, well, this person's in it, and Elie Wiesel, such a dear friend of mine, and Elie Wiesel I would have thought, well, if this person's involved and this person's invested and this person's invested, must be a great guy.
Yeah.
You couldn't have all of these outstanding people who also care about their, finances invested with him if they hadn't checked him out. That's what I probably would have thought.
Yeah. But he is someone who's inside he's a psychopath. Outside he seems like the most trustworthy kind of man of integrity. And that's problem number one.
But no, we haven't talked about the one thing that's now going to become a cultural phrase, and everybody is going to be talking about the truth default.
Yes.
Defaulting to the truth.
Yeah.
The reason why everyone accepted Bernie Madoff is because the default to the truth.
Yeah, this is a really interesting idea from a psychologist called Tim Levine, who I think is who has brilliantly rethought some of the most central issues about how human beings communicate. And his core insight is, he's dealing with the fact that human beings are really bad at figuring out when someone else is lying.
Yeah.
We're just all, with some exceptions.
Including judges.
Judges are bad at it, cops are bad at it. There's a few tiny exceptions, but generally we're not good at it. And the question is, why aren't we good? You'd think would be good, right? Wouldn't evolution have favored those who are good at detecting deception?
Right.
And he says no. The opposite is true, that we are conditioned by evolution to basically assume that everyone is telling the truth unless there is some overwhelming reason to believe otherwise, and unless the doubts rise so high that there's just no way to believe someone's telling us the truth anymore.
And I think it's wonderful that you start with people right where they live. You were saying, and everybody can relate to this, if you believe your spouse is cheating on you, and you ask a question, are you cheating on me, or this doesn't make sense, or that doesn't make sense, and they give a reasonable answer, most people will believe it the first time.
You will default to truth.
You will default to truth.
It's our preferred position is to believe that the world is telling us the truth. And that's why human society works. If every statement you make, I think, I don't know, is she lying? We couldn't have a conversation.
Yeah.
If everyone does that, then the world doesn't work. And that's Tim Levine's point, is that the reason human society functions is because we have a baseline assumption that people are not lying to us. And what that means is, every now and again, one time out of 100, when someone really is lying to us, there's a strong chance we're going to get taken. We're going to get deceived.
Yeah, let's talk about Sandusky. And the people who end up having to serve time because they defaulted to the truth for too long. Let's talk about that.
So we all remember the horrible case at Penn State of Jerry Sandusky, this serial child molester who was a prominent football coach at the school. He was apprehended, he was convicted, he's now in jail for the rest of his life. But the Penn State, the prosecution didn't stop there. They then went after senior officials at the university, including the university's president.
Yes.
And have cases still ongoing, but have pursued a criminal case against those senior administrators as well for a cover-up, for basically of letting this man run free on the Penn State campus. I feel very strongly that it is wrong to pursue a criminal case against those university administrators. I don't think what they were deceived by a child molester. And by the way, child molesters, one of the things that makes them child molesters is they're really good at deceiving the rest of the world.
That's
right?
what I've been trying to tell people.
It's not easy.
Because if you're not good at it, then you can't succeed
Exactly.
in seducing the child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like did we put the people who were deceived by Bernie Madoff into jail? Did we say you should have known better? You were no, we didn't. I really think that attitude is deeply, deeply problematic. Why? We cannot look back in retrospect and blame someone for the failure to pick out a 1 in a million psychopath. We're not hardwired to find psychopaths in our midst. One of the big themes of this book, and this does tie back very strongly to the Sandra Bland case, is that we need to be far more generous in our assessment of other people.
Yes.
We are just so quick to assume that there was a cover-up, someone was negligent, I think it's important for us to pause and to understand when sometimes when mistakes are made, it is because of perfectly understandable or legitimate reasons.
Coming up.
Well, you keep kicking the rock and uncovering so many interesting things in talking to strangers. One of the things that struck me was the Stanford rape case. Can we talk about that?
I'm quite sure this is going to be the most talked about part of the book. And it was really hard to write about. So that was the case where happened a couple years ago. A freshman at Stanford, a boy, meets a young woman at a frat party. They're both very, very drunk, and he takes her outside, and he sexually assaults her. And he's discovered, and he's tried, and he spent 6 months in jail. A hugely controversial case at the time, and particularly because it is a kind of one of those signature cases that has thrown a spotlight on just how big a problem sexual assault now is on campus. And I was interested in one specific part of that case, which is, to what extent does alcohol contribute to this epidemic of sexual assault, right? Mm-hmm. Because the weird thing is that when you start digging through the case files of sexual assault cases, everyone's always drunk. Really, really hard to find a sexual assault case where both parties were sober.
You mean on campus?
On campus. Talking about campus.
Yeah.
On campus, yeah. And so I started to talk to people who study sexual assault on campus and people who study alcohol. And they were like, well, yes, it's almost always alcohol is almost always involved. And they began to talk me through the research. Well, when you drink, and by the way that many of the people who are involved in these cases, and also I might say more generally, the core of people who are drinking on campus in today's environment are drinking in a way that you and I did not drink in that age. Drinking has changed quite dramatically over the last 25 years.
Yes, when I was just reading about this, it's like everybody's drinking everything.
Today, if you I was talking to some friends of mine children friends of mine who are in college right now, and I said, how many of your friends have experienced blackouts? And they're just like, down the list.
Yeah.
Every weekend, we talk about it, they talk about it on Friday night before they go about they're gonna get blackout drunk. It's a very different environment, and that has consequences for their ability to talk to strangers. Parties are about talking to strangers. When both strangers are drunk, it's a different conversation.
So this was the thing that was so revealing to me. Many of those who study alcohol no longer consider it an agent of disinhibition. I mean, I underline that because all of our lives, we've been told it disinhibition. Instead, you say they think of it as an agent of myopia. Tell us what you mean by that.
So the old theory about alcohol was Malcolm gets drunk, and as Malcolm gets a little tipsy, what you see is the real Malcolm.
Yeah.
All of the constraint, uptight Malcolm falls away, and you're seeing like, you see my true self. We no longer believe that. That's nonsense. Instead, what's happening is a little more complicated. When you drink, what's happening is you basically get dumber. Your cognitive faculties start to kind of shrink. And what happens when your cognitive faculties shrink, when you get dumber, is that you get myopic. Everything that is...
Meaning you just focused on what's in front of you.
All that matters is you. Okay, if drunk Malcolm, all that matters is not just you in front of me, but all that matters is what's happening right at this very moment. So normally I don't do certain kinds of crazy things because I realize, oh, there'll be consequences. You know, half an hour later, I'll get in trouble. Or tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh my God, that's why I behave the way I behave when I'm sober. When I'm drunk, all thought of tomorrow falls away. All thought of consequences falls away. And what matters is just here and now, person in front of me.
Yeah.
I am myopic.
Yeah.
And when you are myopic, you are not yourself, right?
I thought another great example that you used, Malcolm, was that the drinking affects you differently depending on where you are. That if you're drinking and you're at a football game and everybody else is drinking, then it is euphoric and blah, blah, blah. And if you are sitting alone at a bar and you're drinking alone, that the alcohol has a completely different effect.
Yes. So myopia theory says that whatever is your immediate circumstance is controlling the way you think and feel and behave. So if I'm drunk and in a wild and crazy party, I'm wild and crazy. If I'm drunk in a dark, quiet, deserted bar, I'm depressed. So you're at the mercy of your environment. Now, think about this.
Interesting.
You take an 18-year-old who is full of hormones, who's immature, who doesn't have much experience with girls. You take him to a frat party. You get him 2.5 times the legal limit of alcohol. So he's completely myopic. You crank up the music. You have all kinds of mayhem around him. First of all, he's no longer himself. And secondly, he is primed to do something incredibly stupid, if not criminal, right? That's
just a formula for
it's a
something
formula
bad
for
happening.
Something super, super bad happening. And we're not communicating that fact to kids. We're not telling that 18-year-old boy who goes to that frat party, if you get blotto drunk, you are putting not just other people, not just yourself at risk, other people at risk, right? There's a sense that alcohol is a kind of harmless, it's not harmless. It is a dangerous, dangerous drug. And I think that absence, what makes me so...
And what makes it more dangerous is not being aware of the consequences of what happens. And it's not just, I think we've done a fairly decent job in recent years of not driving while drunk or not doing certain things when you're intoxicated. But what talking to strangers allows us to see is that it's even deeper than that.
It's deeper than... If I am wasted right now, I have no way to really understand who you are or what you want, right? So if we're having a conversation and I'm half as smart as I normally am and all thought of tomorrow has fallen away, and then maybe I'm blacked out so I can't remember anything. People forget being blackout drunk is not the same as being passed out. I can walk and talk and communicate and tell jokes and wave my hands in the air. It's just that I'm forming no memories. So think about two people and one, they're trying to... You got a boy who's like 18 and full of hormones. What does he want at a party? Absolutely, we know what he wants at a party. And he's trying to negotiate that with a woman, and who knows what he's if she says
he's trying to negotiate with a woman who's also
blackout drunk.
Yeah.
So if she says no, get away from me, he doesn't remember it, right?
Or care
for that matter. Yeah, because he's not thinking about the consequences of tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, this...
Also, not reading any of the signals.
Not
reading any of the signals.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me because when I was thinking, this is certainly not an excuse It's just an explanation.
It's exactly right.
Not
Yeah.
an excuse, it's an explanation. So I was thinking that in many of these cases, when people have been blackout drunk, and people are like, of course you should remember, of course you should know, of course you did that, perhaps they don't.
In the Stanford rape case, one of the heartbreaking things is Jane Doe, the victim, her last memory is at midnight, before she'd even met her assailant, and her next memory is waking up in the hospital and not knowing why she's there. It's all gone, right? And I think that's sort of what makes that case extraordinarily poignant.
And it's so interesting, too, that when surveys were done and you ask students, and students are asked, what could we do to deter some of the sexual assaults on campus, people talk about everything other than drinking.
Yeah, which I don't understand. I don't understand how we got to this position where drinking
I think
became
this is going to
benign.
make a difference, actually, because
Yeah.
I think it's going to make people stand up and look at things in a different kind of way.
Coming up,
Let's switch to some soul-to-soul questions. Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay. What is a piece of wisdom you wish the leaders of the world would use in their decision-making?
It's okay to be wrong.
Ah.
It's fine. Just say, I blew it. Let's try and figure out a better way.
Is there something about the times we're living in now that's harder, more difficult than ever, more challenging than ever, do you think?
People say that, and I don't. There's something about the media culture, maybe, but I don't think, the minute you get outside of New York City and Washington, D.C., people aren't unforgiving. People are just waiting for one of their leaders to stand up and say, I'm sorry I screwed up. Help me do this better. They're just waiting for it. I don't think they would reject that or get angry, or it just has to be said with a certain amount of grace and humility. I think there is as much appetite for longing for humility in our leaders today as there's ever been.
And forgiveness, too.
And forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's something that's fundamentally changed in human nature.
Because people fundamentally are always doing exactly what you say, defaulting to the truth. They want to believe.
They want to believe.
That's why it's so difficult when people are shown the truth right before their eyes for them to actually acknowledge that it's actually happening. What's the most selfless thing you've ever seen?
Selfless.
Selfless thing you've ever witnessed firsthand?
Wow. Most is a kind of, part of me is like, whenever I talk to anyone I know who's a young mother and I figure out how many hours they sleep, is there anything more selfless than that? Than waking up at
There isn't.
There isn't. So maybe that's it. I mean, at its
Nor
core.
more selfless than actually being a good mother or a good
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah.
I
mean, that kind of.
That would be top of my list.
Yeah, I think
when
that's
you
probably
think of all the things that people have to do. I used to think about this all the time with my producers. Tara's one of them, who has 5 kids. So she's there in the office the same amount of time I am. I come home to 3 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
She goes home, you step in the door, there are 5 kids.
Yeah.
Who don't care that you had a whole day and what happened in that day, but you have to be just as you need to be for them in that moment. I don't know anything more selfless than that.
I think that's probably high on my list.
coming up.
What is the question or the mystery that sits in your mind? This question I thought of just for you, that you hope to have answered in your lifetime. And I ask that question because you're one who's always uncovering the mysteries for us.
One question I have always wondered about is, what does it mean to change someone's mind? I'm less and less sure of my ability to change people's minds. And I'm wondering, is it because I'm doing things wrong? Is it because it's much more fun just to play to the people who are already in agreement with you? Am I narrowing myself and just speaking to the kind of
But may
familiar
I say,
voices?
just reading this book, I don't know if my mind was changed, but it certainly was opened. And I'm going to go and read it again because it's done that thing that you most want to do, is to get people to think differently about something. And what I'm always searching for in my conversations with people is that moment where you can get them or the audience to think, oh, gee, I never thought of it that way before. And this is filled with that in every chapter.
Yeah, yeah. But you are an unusually open-minded person, right?
I don't know if I'm unusually open-minded,
You are,
but I'm open-minded, yeah.
So my question is, I mean, I had this incredibly interesting conversation with a Jesuit priest named James Martin, who, one of his causes is, can I get my church to accept gay people? Right? That's one of his. Is there a way for me, and not accept in the sense of, he doesn't think he can get the Pope to change church,
Right.
but just to embrace
the church,
them.
the people in the church.
Yeah, embrace them, treat them as they would treat any other human being or any other Catholic. And I was fascinated to talk to him about, so he's grappling with this problem. Can I change someone's mind who's not inclined to change their own mind? Is there a way for me to deal with this issue with such sensitivity and intelligence and restraint and humility that they will move from, I don't want to talk about it, to, I will happily, pray next to someone like this on a Sunday morning. And that, I was just so kind of in awe of how he was approaching that question, and unsure about whether I could ever figure out how to tackle a task like that.
Well, isn't it true, though, that you can never do it in theory? I remember in all the years of the Oprah show that the way we got people to see things differently, and even many times to change their mind, is not by doing, for example, a show about gay people, but incorporating in the early years gay people taking care of their children, or gay people doing ordinary things that everyone else did, and then you see, oh, gee, they're just like me. I think you have to have a sense of, oh, I see myself in this person. That person's just like me. And so then now, what does it mean to be gay?
Yeah.
Because in so many other ways, they are just like me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you had the great benefit. Well, this is a crucial and really interesting point, which is you had the benefit of time.
Yes.
So you took people on a journey that lasted
25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
And I think that was they started with you way, way back when. They came to trust you, and slowly over time,
Yeah, you're
I'm
right
sure
about that.
you must have changed. But 25 years is a long time, right?
No, but
that's how hard
listen
it
to this,
is.
Malcolm. I remember being in a grocery store once. This is one of my favorite moments, when a woman stopped me and she said, I've been watching your show, and it wasn't the first time you said it, because I didn't believe you. She said, but it's because you have been consistent.
Yes.
She said, you've been consistent. And I watch you, and every time you talk about kids, you say, don't hit your kids, don't hit your kids. And then you talk about Gail, don't hit her kids. She said, and I'm like, how are you gonna have good kids if you don't hit them? So she said, the last time I heard you talk about hitting your kids, I said, I'm gonna try it for 1 week. She said, so I went a week and I didn't hit my kid. And then I went another week and I didn't hit my kid. And she said, it's been 3 months and I haven't hit my kid, and I have a different kid, and I'm a different mother. Mm-hmm. So it's not one thing, it's the over time,
Yeah.
that you're saying.
Yeah. No, I think that is but that idea of introducing patience into the process is really crucial, though. Like, maybe we get into trouble when we're we think we can do these kinds of changes overnight. And what we need to do is accept the fact that it's a 25-year process.
Yes. I read this book and then ended up calling you because I wanted to have a conversation. And I feel that way. I feel so passionately when I experience something that changes the way I see myself and I see others, which I think is what this book has done. So I want people to read talking to strangers, because it's one of those experiences that will actually change the way you not just see strangers, it will change the way you look at the news, it will change the way you experience all encounters with other people.
Yeah.
When you sent this off to your publisher and you had done the final page and brought us all the way back around to Sandra Bland, your deepest hope for the book was?
That we would all acknowledge our complicity in the death of Sandra Bland. That wasn't about a rogue cop and a stupid, small town and what have you. It was about that we have institutionalized ways of dealing with strangers that make no sense. We have asked police officers, required them, forced them, pushed them to making judgments about people that shouldn't be made.
You were saying it may be about some of what it looked like, but there was also so much more.
There was so much more. We have designed, this last part of the book is really about how have we designed how have these faulty ideas about dealing with strangers affected the way our law enforcement system is designed? And the answer is all the things we talked about. Assumptions about transparency,
Right.
default to truth, have fed into...
What's a match? What isn't a match? Yeah.
Have fed into a philosophy of law and order, which has had disastrous results.
So you didn't let us forget Sandra Bland.
No.
Thank you.
Let's not ever forget her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good. That was fun. Thank you.